says. Welcome to the South West London and Surrey Joint Health Scrutiny Committee Subcommittee, Improving Health Care Together. Just to start off, if we may, welcome to our new representative from County Council. And it's not Jeff Harris, so there's been a change in the change, and Bill Chapman is going to be our permanent representative from Surrey County Council on this committee. So welcome, Bill. Thank you. No apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. I have to say that my wife works at St Helena Hospital on the dialysis unit. And has anybody else got any declarations? No? Okay, thank you very much. We have the minutes of the last meeting. We do not have matters arising as on the agenda, that's normal. But what we do have on these particular minutes is on page 5, when we ask officers to go away and research the terms of reference of the stakeholder reference groups, with particular reference to a question that was raised by a member of the public regarding the a confidentiality clause that was possibly inserted in it. So we have a comment, and I refer you to the paragraph that nobody asked the SRG members to sign a non-disclosure agreement, nor was it ever used in this terminology. So that's there. We don't know if anyone wants to comment on that at all, but thank the officers for finding out that.
I'd like to say that I was asked to sign a non-confident.
Excuse me, if you let us continue, you'll actually understand the process and how we're going to deal with this. Thank you. The meeting is being filmed, that's fine for witnesses and for members of councils, but not for any members of the public. It's to film other members of the public, so just to make people aware. Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm kind of puzzled, because in the second paragraph it says very clearly that Traverse did not ask any SRG member to sign a non-disclosure agreement, not ever use this terminology. And then we've got a copy of the agreement that was required, that required a signature, and at the bottom of the first page it says, we will ask all participants to read and consider information provided to them before the meeting. Anything unclear, we will be sharing information about the local NHS with members and ask you to keep it confidential and not share any document outside the group. Now, to me, that's entirely inconsistent with the second paragraph. This is, as far as I'm concerned, a non-disclosure agreement. The member of the public that raised it is here and was asked to sign it. So, could somebody explain why we're being told that they weren't asked to sign something that was a non-disclosure agreement when it's quite clear that they worked? Who's responsible?
So can I just give an initial response, if that's okay? So I know we've debated this, I think, on a couple of occasions, and of course the question I think has been asked outside of here in terms of I think matters of interpretation around it. So this was a terms of reference that was developed by Traverse, which I think members of the committee will know was an independent organisation that was asked to facilitate the options development sessions. There was a recognition, I think, by both Traverse and the programme that there was information that was being shared at the options review workshops, which in some cases was still in development and hadn't been finalised, and therefore what Traverse asked, and this was their words, not the programme's words, what Traverse asked was that members who were attending those sessions would work with those terms of reference, which I accept, I think, depending on how you read the words, could be interpreted in a certain way. They were never intended as a non-disclosure agreement. They were intended to provide the kind of rules of engagement, as I would put it, around participating in those workshops. And I do understand and acknowledge, I think in David Olney, the officer's report, there is an interpretation that has been put on that. I think it is open to question, But my view remains that it is not and was not intended as a non-disclosure agreement.
I'd just like to record that I think that's nonsense. I think it is quite clear that you were telling people not to share information that you were sharing, and actually hiding behind the fact that Traverse is an independent organisation. Who commissioned them? Who pays them? It is, again, it's just not credible. So, you know, I attended a whole load of engagement exercises last summer where my local constituents were repeatedly saying that they have no confidence and trust in this process. And when you stand up and tell me black is white, when you can see this, then you know, it just adds to that feeling. Local people don't trust, and don't trust the process. And whilst you continue to behave like that, you are not going to win that trust back. And until you realise just how much ill feeling there is amongst the people, amongst the community that I represent, then you're simply not credible.
Can I just say, we sitting here represent over 500,000 people. If we were to present the paragraph that our office has got and this piece of paper, I'd certainly like that majority at my next election, because quite frankly, I think we're talking about 90% of the public would take the view that we are taking as councillors here as representatives of the public. And quite frankly, I quite agree with Councillor McCullough. This has not come across as a way. You cannot get away with just trying, in your interpretation, Andrew. There's no interpretation. They are your representatives. You pay them out of public money. And quite frankly, from my point of view, and the rest of us as elected councillors, that says that. There's a signature on the back that says this is confidential. Ask the general public, would that be seen as a confidentiality agreement? I suspect it would. But we'll leave that one. Thank you very much, officers, for getting us all the information. And I would just be saying to the whole programme, just take this into account, please, because you are trying to get the public to understand what you want to do, and this is very difficult. It's a simple case of black and white. Thank you very much. So we will move on now, but thank you, officers, for getting that information for us. So it's a very short agenda tonight in terms of agenda items. Can you bring the minutes with the amendment and...
Well, they're a true record of what happened. So it doesn't
No. So what we do have, though, our conversation tonight will be part of the minutes here.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will move on into the minutes of this meeting. Okay, thank you very much. It's basically one agenda item. What I would say was that because, and very fortunately, extra papers came out the day before, and as you will realise as part of the programme, councils have to work on the Constitution, and you can only send papers out on a constitutional basis for timescales, the same as you can for your CCGs as well. It was very fortunate those papers came out probably one day before, so we could put the extra papers and have it as a discussion document. If we couldn't, we'd have been in real difficulty. So what we are saying is you need to be very aware, you know when these meetings are, you know when your papers need to be done. My officers and all the officers that support you know that as well, support my councillors, so please make contact and make certain that papers can get out on time. Some of us here have full-time jobs, and it's sometimes quite challenging to take all those papers in at short notice. So what I'd like to do now, please, if I may, is move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the update, and I think that Andrew's going to lead on that one, and then we've got a couple of sub-presentation from Matthew, I think, on that one as well. So Peter, Andrew, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say around the timing of papers that to be clear, I think that the programme does try and make sure that we are, I think, issuing papers as and when they are produced. And we have to take a decision, I think, in advance of the scheduling committee that given, I think, the time of some of the conversations of the programme board, that we still wanted to proceed with the meeting. We felt that if we deferred for another month, then we would delay, I think, having some important conversations by way of updates. And I think we heard loud and clear, I think, Chair, at the last session that we had the importance, particularly on the provider impact work of making sure that we shared that. So quite a lot has happened, I think, since we were last together. And you heard last time from Brian and Hattie Fowler, who were just to my right, from Mark McDonald, who were, I think, sharing the emerging findings from the integrated impact assessment when we last met. I'm pleased to say that alongside the clinical Senate report that we published on the 26th of June, the draft Phase 2 integrated impact assessment we shared. And the reason why we've brought back Brian and Hattie this evening is that they are available to both answer questions and really at your discretion, Chair, to offer any further commentary, I think, on the integrated impact assessment. All of the CCG governing bodies and through the programme board have looked hard at what Mark McDonald have produced in terms of their Phase 2 findings. There's a lot of information, I think, to digest, and I'm sure the committee will have its views about it, but it is only, I think, at this point, at a stage in the process, and that we won't be asking Mark McDonald to conclude the integrated impact assessment, in fact, until we've gone through consultation, and the outputs of that can then be shared, I think, with governing bodies as part of the decision-making process. But I would, I think, just thank Mark McDonald for their work. I think it raises a whole series of implications about the options that we've been discussing and continuing to discuss in terms of the positive and negative impacts. I also think it sets out an agenda for areas where we could seek to bring about a number of improvements, really, through a series of mitigations, depending on which of the options ultimately becomes a preferred option and the Trust will seek to implement. They're available, again, for questions and any points of clarification. On the clinical Senate report, which again we published on the 26th of June, I just want to say a few things. So it's a comprehensive report which sets out a number of recommendations to the CCGs in relation to the clinical model, and perhaps on page 12 of the papers, in fact it's page 2 of my programme report, I think there are a couple of important messages. I think firstly, that given its independence of two senates that have come together to look at the report, it's fair to say the CCG were pleased that the Senate has commended the programme for its drive and initiative in developing what they see is an innovative solution to the challenges that we continue to raise and are seeking to address around excellence in earlier hospitals. They also make quite clear, I think, in the report that they support the proposal to consolidate major acute services into a single location, but they have also, I think, quite rightly acknowledged the importance of district hospital services being available in the model and there to complement those major acute services. There's a lot of recommendations, as I said, that we will be seeking to work through over time. We are already, it's fair to say, through the clinical advisory group, beginning to address many of those recommendations. But some of those recommendations, of course, will have to be looked at in the context of implementing the model somewhat downstream. So that's all I wanted to say on the Clinical Senate report. But both Dr. James Marsh and Geoffrey Crouch is available for comments. I'm not going to say much on the impact on providers because I'm pleased that Matthew Kershaw, who is the Programme Board Acute Chief Executive Representative of all the other providers, is here this evening and can give you his view on the work that we have been doing. And equally, I think within the report, provide an update on what we're doing around the stakeholder reference group and consultation planning. But as I said last time when we met, and I'll keep repeating this, that we will be unable to proceed to consultation, however much planning that we're doing, until we have a supporting principle from regulators around capital. But we're doing our best to begin some of that planning. In closing, Chair, there are a few, I think, important remarks just to make around the next steps in relation to the programme. So later in June, not far away, on the 19th of June, the programme board will meet. July. I apologise. July will meet to review the additional evidence and therefore the latest evidence that we've been generating in relation to the programme. Following this, we do intend to submit to regulators an updated version of the pre-consultation business case. And we are seeking, therefore, regulators to review that updated pre-consultation business case. And I alluded to the fact that there is a staged process to review and scrutinise the case. We are required by regulators to indicate at this stage a ranking of options at this point in the process, although it may change, of course, and that will enable the NHS England and NHS Improvement to properly scrutinise, I think, the case and our arguments really in relation to each of the options. And that will give us a stronger position, I think, to indicate really that we are seeking further down track a decision to support capital availability. However, the ranking does not mean that we have agreed a preferred option. We are declaring where we are in the process, and determining a preferred option will take place after we have gone through a national issuance process. We looked at all of the feedback that we'll have in relation to our arguments, both for the non-financial evidence as well as the financial evidence, and that will help us ultimately, I think, determine a preferred option that we would seek to go to consultation on alongside any other options that we've considered. So it's quite important, I think, that whilst we're being as open and transparent as possible around the evidence consideration and where that leaves us, I think, at this point, at the end of July, around a potential ordering of options at a point in time, it will be much further down a track that we will ultimately come to a final decision-making process that will involve the three CCGs. So I think that's quite important in terms of, I guess, news for the committee. But a natural conclusion, I think, from the work that we've been doing around the timeline.
Yes, thanks very much for the presentation and the written evidence. I think I found it really, really useful. With regard to the next step, so on the 19th of July, you have a next key step in the process. Is it slightly lost about exactly what's happening then? So you've got, by then you'll have decided your current preferred options. No, I got it wrong. Okay, you would have ordered your, yes. So ordered current, yeah, anyway, so they're what you currently think is the things. Now, soon after that, you have to get, I presume soon after that, you have to get the funding and then you can go to public consultation. Yeah. Have you any ideas about how long it will take to get yes, no, no funding?
So just to be clear, so we will, it's still a draft pre-consultation business case that we will submit. It is different this time because we have to await national agreement before we can consult. It used to be you would consult, then you would take your PCBC up to the national team, and then they would say whether or not you can have the funding. We're doing it that we are having to do the PCBC or draft PCBC and this process before we can actually go out to consult. So it's a slightly different process than we used to actually, and it's quite difficult for us because we have to await the feedback from the national team because there may be changes. They may say, you know, around the finances, you made an assumption here we're not happy with, and you need to make different assumptions. It's around assumptions over a very long period, and it will be national decisions, and that may change the ranking, which would mean we have a different preferred option when we come to make that decision. That's why we're not saying it's a preferred option, because it might change. So what we would then do is then we would make a formal decision as CCGs that we would want to go to consult and we have a preferred option or not, and we would consult on all of the options that we currently have on the table. That would be our intent. We are reliant on the national process as to when we can do that, because we cannot go to consultation or do that process until we have their full feedback and they have confirmed that we can go to consultation, which means that we have a good chance of receiving the capital funding. And that's where we're sort of in a different process than previously, and we don't actually know how long that will take. We know that they may require us to wait for the spending review, so we may be the back end of the year. They may say, actually, we're happy with the process that you've got and where you've got to with the capital, and we can agree this earlier. It may take even longer. We just don't know. So we would love to be able to say we'll go out in the autumn, and I think that's when we will be ready. So I think from our perspective, we will have completed all the work that we said we would do up to that point, and we would be ready to go sort of September time. But until we get the feedback from the national and all that process is complete, we can't do anything.
Yes, thanks. That's really clear. Thank you.
Just to check this on a bit stage further, we're in a meeting in public, it's recorded. So what can the public expect to see on the 19th of July? What is in the public domain in terms of information? And I assume it's collating your evidence that you've collected from all sorts, every source you have, and ranking it against the recommendations. So I see that, but when we look at the public, what will the public be able to see? What will they be able to change? And I assume that's not very much in the first stages because it goes through the NHS system. But I think it's very important for us to be able to record what the public can expect from the 19th of July. And who's making those decisions?
Yeah.
I assume it's a joint CCG, am I right?
No, it's not.
No,
It's not a
okay.
formal decision. We're just in the middle of a process, in a programme process,
Okay.
so we're not making any formal decisions. So just to be clear on that.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we don't actually have to take anything out to the public, but we think that's wrong. So we believe that we want to tell people where we've got to in the process and what our thinking is. There's a risk associated with that because people may say they've made a decision, this is where they are, we haven't, and we'll try and make that as clear as possible. So after the 19th, it's our intent to make public where we've got to in that. We aren't yet sure whether we can release the PCBC, draft PCBC, because it has to go through that process. It is drafted, but what we will try and do is provide some of the evidence of why, our thinking behind where we've got to and what that is. So we're going to be looking at that over the next few weeks, and we'll make that discussion we'll have on the 19th, and then we'll release it post the 19th. And that's when we will also send the draft PCBC up to the national team. Is that okay?
So, if I heard correctly, you were saying that you don't think that one of the processes is correct, so you're going to share more than you are required to. Is that right?
No, I said I don't think we're required to, it's not a different in a public meeting and we have to, we're not required to publish anything. What I'm saying is we think it's right that we tell the public where we've got to in the process and that we make that public, so that's what we are going to do.
Do you think it's right to share this public pre-consultation business plan with the elected representatives that are sitting in front of you this evening? Or are you going to keep it from us until you decide when you're going to share it?
So we're going to take some advice on what we are allowed to share, because it isn't actually a finalised document, it hasn't been through a process, it's still got to go through our regulators. And we will just check that what we can and what would be the right thing to share. What we want to do is be as open as we can with the public and be clear where we are in the process and what we are doing. And normally you wouldn't be, in the past, you wouldn't be doing this in this way because you would be consulting before you actually went through this process. So we are doing the process sort of back to front from our perspective, but that is the right thing, because what it means is that we actually have an answer around capital before we progress to a consultation, which is a much better position, because in the past in the NHS we have been out to consultation and then had a lot of discussion with the public and got to the end of it, made a decision and then haven't had the capital to be able to implement our what we would like to do. And we don't want to do that because we feel that we've done that in the past and that's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, so ordinarily, so I absolutely agree with so we want to release as much information as we can into the public domain, which is why as we've been going along, we've been publishing, I think, the reports as and when they immediately become available. So what we want to do is try and put together effectively all of that evidence into a digestible kind of document, and it may be that what we do is look at some specific chapters or bring all of that together into a specific evidence file, and then we can share that, I think, with the public. But what would normally happen is the full and final pre-consultation business case is shared immediately before you go to consultation. And if you look up and down the line, that's the normal process. What we're saying is we've given a commitment to try and be as open as possible, and we'll share our thinking and working at a point in time.
I think if we all know our residents, our patients, the first page they'll turn to is what's the recommendation, what's the options, or with the evidence. So, as long as that's fairly clear, I think we're fine. Could I take a clinical cabinet? So it's the same subject, yes, fine.
Are you saying definitively that you are not lawfully allowed to share this information with elected members of the local authority at this stage who have responsibility for the scrutiny of local government? I mean, it's a yes or a no answer. I did hear you say you didn't know what you were.
No, I don't think it's
You've not taken advice?
I don't think it's a legal issue. I think we will need to decide whether or not we can release everything that's in there, because some of it may change, and whether it's in the best interest to do that. But what we will do is we'll release as much of the information as we can, so that people can understand where we've got to in the process.
When?
After the 19th.
I think what we might do is we'll have a discussion with our officers and we'll get them to talk to you on that. In terms of the clinical cabinet, I think it's really good. But that clinical cabinet meeting was some time ago, because I know some people that sat on it. You've been collecting evidence for some time, so I suppose I have a slight concern. Have you managed to review any of the later evidence that's come forward to substantiate their feelings in the case, or make some slightly different recommendations? Because it was a few months ago now, if I remember rightly.
So there is a clinical advisory group which is part of the IHT programme. That clinical advisory group was formed in January 2018, and we started to develop the model from that point. As far as the clinical senate is concerned, yes, we met the clinical senate as a programme team in January, and gave them the opportunity for us then to review the clinical model directly with our team and with the group that was there. What they then did was then complete a joint clinical senate report, and that was between London and South East. And then they looked at that report was then looked at and was published in March for us then to review. And what we've then had an opportunity to do as a clinical advisory group is then review that draft recommendation from Joint Clinical Senate and have a look at how those recommendations could then influence the future clinical model. That's what we've done.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that collecting all this, crime documents and crime evidence, that we just don't use that to reference our decisions. And from us, our point of view, and your point of view, we want the best evidence that we can that's going forward. So don't want it left on a shelf and not used as a live document, really. No, thank you very much for that clarification.
Could I go back to the membership of the Travel and Access Working Group? Looking down so that's Appendix 2 of the report. Andrew, it has no elected members on it. I just wonder whether it might be a good idea to get some involvement with elected members, simply because it's almost certain that when comes out to public consultation is going to be one of the issues, and having members on side would be useful.
No, to take your point, I think the other thing I would say is that in the future, when we come to a point, I think, at which there is agreement on a preferred option, there is consultation and there's decision making and there's clarity, I think, on a preferred option, there will be a need, I think, to reassemble a planning group. I'm very happy to take thoughts on who we should involve more directly in that, because there will be a lot of detail to work through around what are the priority actions that we need to take to mitigate some of those issues. Thank you.
We've gone through timelines quite quickly. Sarah went through them. Can we have something to our officers, some expectations about what we think on the timeline? Did I hear that probably the first time we might go to consultation is sometime in September? We know what August is like, both in the NHS and in local authorities. It seems to slow down quite
So the
considerably.
earliest we will be ready to go to consultation is September. I think the likelihood is that it may be later than that based on whatever the regulators then do. But, that's the earliest possible date that we could go in September. But it may not be September. We will just have to wait and see what happens with the regulators. And the Treasury as well, it goes up through a national process.
Well, it could always be Halloween, 31st of October. There's quite a lot happening on that day, or supposed to be, I think, allegedly. Anyway, thanks very much. Anybody else? Matthew, would you like to continue this agenda item with something about the provider impact to the provider?
Of course, Chair, and I should perhaps introduce myself as I've not been at this group previously. So I'm Matthew Gershwin. My day job is Chief Executive at Croydon Health Services, and I am the provider Chief Executive representative of the 6 impacted providers on the programme board. So that's my role, and I've taken over in that position from Anne Madmore, who I think you may have met previously. So, and what I was going to do, if members would find helpful, would just be to talk through a little bit of the process and the outcome of the provider impact work thus far, as that's a important but by no means the only key aspect of the assessment of options and ranking thereof. So happy to take questions as I go if there's something that people don't understand as I'm describing it, and then obviously I'll have to take some questions afterwards if that's okay with members. So the provider impact group basically is made up of the 6 affected provider organisations, or impacted potentially organisations by these changes at Epsom St Helier. And those organisations are my own in Croydon, St George's and Kingston in south-west London, and then Surrey in Sussex, Royal Surrey County and Ashley St Peters in North Surrey. So those 6 providers are those defined as impacted by these proposals, and the directors of strategy or equivalents from each of those organisations have been part of a technical group which has been looking at a range of impacts on providers to help us make this assessment, and that also includes some representation from the ambulance services affected, both the London Ambulance and South East Coast. And what that group has been doing in detail is looking at how activity flows, how patient flows might be affected by these changes to the location of acute services, and what that patient flow impact might then be on beds, on theatres, on the capacity for other services such as diagnostics, X-ray, pharmacy, pathology, etc. And importantly, the financial aspects of that, both from an estate's perspective, so what buildings would need to be changed to accommodate any changes in patient flows, any of the revenue impact, so what would it cost in terms of additional or changed workforce on those providers, depending upon what options were chosen. And that group of technical discussions has been underway for some time, and it's been added to with clinical input from a clinical advisory group which has combined medical directors and nursing directors from within those 6 providers to do a broad overall assessment of the potential impact on those 6 providers of the location of the major acute services, whether that be at Epsom, at St Helier, or indeed at a new site at Sutton. Those assessments have been completed and they have all been taken through the statutory boards of each of those organisations, and those organisations have now responded in a consistent way in terms of an output from those discussions to the programme board, which will help therefore the programme board review those impacts and use it as part of the overall pre-consultation business case. And some early analysis of that was included and referenced in the integrated integrated impact assessment, and the full analysis, when completed, will be incorporated into the final version of that document. So that's what has been done in terms of steps. It's quite an involved process, and it's important that that is done in that way to make sure that the implications or potential implications of these various options are thought through carefully. That's important for those providers. It's important for the programme board. I'd say more importantly, it's important for the population that we serve and that you are representing. And the analysis has been completed to a point of an initial assessment. As I say, that's been submitted to the programme board. And the overall conclusion of that work, I'm happy to take more detailed questions, but overall, what has been said by those 6 providers is that any of the options are deliverable for each of them. So there's obviously 3 options, and there's 3 options for each of the providers, and that the overall response is that they are all deliverable. But importantly, there is a difference in the ability, the ease of deliverability depending upon which option you choose, and that's an important point to make, because not all options are equal, clearly, and some of those have impacts on workforce, some of them have impacts on capital or revenue from a finance perspective, and some of them have a not insignificant impact on the estate and building infrastructure that would be needed. So those options are not the same, but what is consistent is that all providers believe that the key options are all deliverable. And that's important for this group to hear, and also important for us in the programme boards, because that obviously will impact directly on what the final discussions are around the ranking and therefore what goes into the pre-consultation business case. But in terms of those impacts, clearly things like geography and the movement of patients does have an impact on providers to a differing degree. So from my perspective at Croydon and St George's, clearly the bigger impact is if the major acute services move to the Epsom site, because that means more patients would be very likely, based on travel times and accessibility, be then coming to the George's site and the Croydon site, and therefore the costs for us and the deliverability is tougher than if that site was at Sutton or at St Helier. That is not that complicated, but important to be clear. And the flip is true if you're a North Surrey provider, if you're at Surrey and Sussex or the Royal Surrey County or Ashford St Peters. If that change to a hot site is St Helier, then clearly there is a greater chance of patients moving post that change to one of your sites in Surrey, and therefore the impact for them is bigger at that end. So that's the basic analysis that's been done, and I'm keeping it relatively simple. There is a fair amount of technical detail below it, but we could get into a whole load of stuff that is probably not necessary at this moment, although obviously as we go through the process, the full detail of what's been discussed will clearly be shared. What I can say is in terms of the financial aspects, and that is only one part of this, and it's important for that not to be seen as the only key factor. It is by no means the only key factor. Workforce is a big issue, deliverability is a big issue, the estates aspects are a big issue, but finances, in terms of the capital costs, the most significant capital cost based on the analysis done by the technical staff in each of those providers is greatest at Epsom and Helier. Based on current figures, that is it Epsom, sorry, not Epsom and Helier. If the hot site, the acute site goes to Epsom, the capital cost is the greatest out of all of the options, and there's figures in the material that we provided.
That's in total or just incremental cost for the other provider?
That's the capital cost for the other providers. It's not making a judgment about the capital costs for Epsom and St Helier for the changes, because this is about the impact on other providers. Now, obviously, there's still work in progress on this. Nothing is absolutely fixed at this stage, as we've just heard. There's still work to be done, and that will continue until such time as we've had feedback from the regulators centrally and the final documents are done. But at this moment, as it says in the documentation that you've got, the capital costs, if the hot site was at Epsom, for those other 6 providers is, the figures in the document, £174 million. If it was at St Helier, that cost would be £44 million, and if it was at Sutton, that cost would be £39 million. So those are the broad figures, and that's based on what it would take for those individual 6 providers to make their estate compliant and ready to take the numbers of patients that it is modelled would move. Now clearly that's a modelling factor rather than absolute science, but it is what we have and it's consistent across each of those providers. So also in the document you can see a table on page 4 that talks about low, medium and high impacts on a variety of different criteria against each of the sites for each of the 6 providers. So I won't go through all of those because we'll never get to the end of this conversation, but you can see there's a variety and it's broadly in line with what I've previously said. But the key point I think on that slide is to look at those items that are the tests that we're using. So it's the capacity of the physical estate, so how much space do you have in A&E, how many theatres do you have, what ward beds you need, and what support services are required. The estates and capital costs, I&E is income and expenditure, that's the revenue costs that support the activity on a hospital site. The workforce, so the numbers of staff that you need, and then a judgment about deliverability. And those are the criteria that each board has used to make a judgment, either low, medium or high impact, on whether or not it's the hot site is at Epsom, St Helier or indeed at Sutton. And that's been the work that we've done. So I think it's probably enough, because I could carry on talking for another 25 minutes about it and that isn't going to help. But happy to take any questions about what I said or indeed things I haven't said that you wish I had.
Can you clarify on capital? You laid it out very clearly. The capital that you need for this, that will be part of the overall package. So when this paper goes up, recommendations will be ranked, and the capital for these particular outlying hospitals will be included in the whole thing that goes up. Because what I was concerned about, if it wasn't, and then we've got to do other bits. So just clarification that it's all in the package that you all submit through the system.
So the short answer is yes, because that's how you make a judgment about the relative likelihood of success of any one of the options, and it's part of the ranking. So if one option becomes extremely expensive, then clearly that's going to be a potential issue compared to other options which are, in inverted commas, better value for money or more affordable, would probably be a better description. So yes, the reason I say broadly rather than absolutely is because what this doesn't mean is that that's the only capital that those other sites need to continue to develop their services going forward. So this is only for capital costs that are related to these changes. So if at Croydon we want to, as we do, improve other facilities on the site, we can't put that into these costs because we want to do those anyway, and it's irrespective of which of these options is chosen. So the only cost that we can actually put into this analysis is those costs that are directly as a result of the changes in patient flows, depending upon which option is chosen. So you may hear of other bids for capital from any one of those 6 hospitals and say, well, hang on a minute, I thought that was supposed to be in the Improving Healthcare Together pot. Well, it can't be if it's not directly impacted by the movement of this group of patients.
Give us clarification for me, so
Yeah.
Yeah, just on the question of the revenue budget, have you anything significant to say about that?
In terms of which options are, I mean,
how big is the impact on your revenue budget?
so it's a bit less easy to be specific on revenue than it is on capital, because capital you can work out the size of the theatre, the increase in the theatres that you need, the increase in the beds that you need, etc. The staffing, there's obviously a bit of a movement of staffing around the system, and so the revenue costs are not quite as straightforward. So I wouldn't want to be on record at this moment to say absolutely exactly which one of those options makes the biggest impact. There is further work for us to do on that. That's something we'll continue to look at. But at this stage, the biggest sort of way we can compare against different options is on the more significant in terms of overall size of the budget to those capital costs. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
So can I just as the SPPs, I think we're all committed to, if we make a decision that major acute services move, and then as the activity moves around the system, that obviously then we would make sure the revenue followed the activity, so that hopefully nobody is worse off. I think there's a much more complicated, as Matthew pointed out, analysis for an individual organisation about, you know, whether that means they're less well off or more well off, if you see what I mean, as far as their revenue is concerned. But there is a commitment that that nobody will lose out by not receiving the revenue for the activity that's moving around. So it would, but there's a much more complex analysis that would tell you whether or not somebody thinks that's a good thing or a bad thing. Really.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify with you? You're from Croydon,
Yes.
and you're the Chief Executive of the Trust there. That's your day job. I think you just got it right. And what you're saying is that the St Hellier option is the lowest impact on Croydon.
Yes, that's correct.
And the St George's Trust is saying the same thing. Does the model that you're describing, how does it deal with the proximity of those affected, and how does the weighting become included in that calculation? Because one assumes that the nearer the hospital, the more the impact will be in terms of patient movement.
Okay. So if I just explain how I think how the analysis has been done, on what basis that might answer your question. If it doesn't, then I'll come back and try and explain it again. So let's take a Croydon example. So if the hot site, the acute services, became St Hellier, that's where the hot site became, then the patients who currently go to St Hellier would continue to go to St Hellier. The patients who currently go to Epsom, some would go to St Hellier and some would go to North Surrey, because that's where the closest hospital is. It's a very small number that might come to Croydon, but not that many, because the location of the hot site is close to the big population base in St Hellier. And therefore the impact on Croydon is lower in that scenario. If the hot site was at Epsom, then the patients who currently go to St Hellier could go to Epsom, But similarly, they could go to St George's or they could come to us and say at Croydon, and therefore the flow of patients would be greater if the hot site was at Epsom. And that's why the impact for us at Croydon is greater if the hot site is at Epsom than it is at Sutton or at St Helier. And the flip side is true if you're a Surrey provider. So it depends on the location of the hot site in the model, and therefore based on travel times, etc., where we believe in a model most patients would, where the patients would go. Now that's only one element of a provider impact, so it's not the only thing that's looked at. And of course the provider impact is only one element of a range of analyses that are done to decide on the ranking. So the provider impact is important, of course it is, but I wouldn't want it to say that it's the only factor or necessarily the most important factor, but it is very important that it is properly analysed, and that's what we believe we've done in this situation. If that helps answer the question.
Thank you, Carl.
We're going through another reorganisation in the NHS, and we've got ICSs coming up. How are you trying to factor in the future? I know it's very difficult to do that, but we have got another change coming through the systems. Do you think it will make any difference?
I'm happy to give my view.
Yeah.
I mean, so this isn't, you're absolutely right, the only thing that is happening in the health service. There are other development initiatives going on. And some of those initiatives are around the South West London system, so the SDP or the ICS, and some of them are within the provider. So there are, in South West London, 4 acute providers. There's Croydon, there's St George's, there's Epsom, St Helier, and there's Kingston. And we already, as a group of 4, talk with each other and collaborate where that makes sense. So, for example, there's something called South West London Pathology, where we've come together, 3 of those 4, with a 4th to join, to collaborate and create a bigger, more sort of sustainable service to pathology across the 4 trusts in South West London. So those things are happening all the time, and I would anticipate and indeed encourage some of those things to happen going forward. Where it makes sense to collaborate, we should do so for the benefits of patients, efficiency, staffing, whatever it might be. That's a good thing to do. Obviously, there's a proper due process to go through for those things. That's happened before this programme, it's happening during this programme occurring, and it will continue to happen afterwards. This programme isn't the only thing, as you say, that's going on. And I would say that's very likely to continue when we're not the ICS or is the driver of that general work in the health service to looking at how we can provide the best services to the population, make them efficient and effective, and create the best opportunities for staff that we employ is going to carry on, and I wouldn't see that as a bad thing. I'd see it as a good thing as long as it's done in the right way by all parties concerned. And I think the ICS is another version of that, and that's absolutely fine, and there will be work from that.
So I see ICS as an enabler. It's not about service delivery. What the ICS will do is it brings together the partners in order to make the absolute best of what we can do together and how we can deliver together in a way that makes sense. So the output of some of that work might be that we want to make a change, or we might do something different, in which case it would impact directly on the services. What it can do definitely is improve the way we work together. So by working in an integrated way across health, local authorities and NHS providers and others, in order to get the best value and the best types of joined up care for our local populations, I think it absolutely has potential to do a great deal. But it's not an organisation and it's not a service. What it is a way of working together in order to achieve absolutely the best. It might be that something comes out of that work that then says actually we need to make a change or do something differently, in which case we would follow due process and do it properly for the local population.
Can I do? That's what I was trying to get at. This provider assessment has been done at a moment in time, as your evidence is collected at a moment in time, but we are moving at such a pace in certain areas, certainly. So I was trying to just tease out that they are live documents, that they can be refreshed, and you are using the data and the changes that are coming to us to actually move on.
So I agree with that. I think I think that around a key aspect of ICS is the integration of services. The key area one of the key areas for integration is community and primary care network development. That will be reflected and is reflected in the draft pre-consultation business case, and I think in some of the issues that we've put out and really engaged on, that developing model, which I think is consistent with the development of ICS, is there. It's really important, and it will be really important to gather views from the public and how that's being developed as we go through this process, and it's central to this redevelopment.
Thanks. It was just to reassure us that I think we all needed that things don't just sit and they are looked at and refreshed and move forward. Can I just say, from a scrutiny point of view, that some of you were at the original meeting of this administration year, 2 years ago, May before last. There was a long discussion about provider impact, and this group was set up on the basis of the activity around St Helier Hospital and the 3 major users of it. We did agree to take back this provider analysis to the other councils within, representatives within the overall scrutiny committee. Once that goes to there, we could find that this impact assessment, and it could be based very much on your list of recommendations, and one might say it's a good time to come out, because at the next meeting, which is on the 30th of July, it's a new cycle, and we will be discussing things like the provider impact assessment. We could have a slightly different reformed committee with more representation, taking account some of the activities there. So this just puts you as a programme in the know about what could be happening too. So we want the best representation from our boroughs for our residents, so that's the journey that we have from our own side as well. Thank you for this. I'm going to ask that these become part of the minutes of the meeting. I think they're important, they are in the public domain, and it will be a lot easier than asking my colleague here to write it all out. Sarah, is that okay?
Yes, I just want to say those numbers could change. So we put numbers in this, but they might change. We are trying very hard to be as open as we can, but we are putting things into the public domain now that aren't yet finalised. So I'm just making you aware of that, and I'd like that minuted so that we don't actually, if we then come out with a slightly different set of numbers because we've done some more work, that somebody says, why are your numbers different? Because we are in danger, because we are making so much public, of kind of getting to the point where people say, well, you don't know what you're doing, or you haven't worked through numbers. So we put some numbers in here, but these are still being worked through.
When you say numbers, you mean the letters?
Capital numbers, the capital
The
numbers.
the H's.
So on page 3.
Oh, bottom.
Yeah, bottom of page 3.
Yeah.
Talks about capital.
Okay. I'm happy for your team and the officers to come with a form of words just to lead into
I just think
this
it's important because
just to clarify that no one's going to hold you to account on page 3. But I do think it's important. It's much easier for people to have.
That's where we are now. So you're getting a version of where we are now, but
Yeah, and I think if we can, officers can liaise on a form of words that just leads this item, this particular paper in. Yeah. Andrew, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just to say that you alluded to the meeting on the 30th of July. Obviously made available the same information in a report and paper for that committee, which has the broader membership of all the councils at that. We'll share the same information.
Thank you. Will it be more information? This is a slightly not redacted, but it's
so at this point in time, that's the information that we'll share, plus a more fuller exposition of the process that we've been through, I think, as a narrative paper. So that will be what we share.
So, for instance, if colleagues wanted a bit more understanding about the clinical side of things, this is the A&E, the theatres, etc., how would that become available? Because I think that's the concern people have. Maybe not so much about mistakes and things like working, but where they go to services. Is this type of information in the public domain, or is it Is it not going to be there? Is it so worked up that it's a bit difficult?
So, I mean, on the 30th of July, you know, difficulty providing answers to questions about those things, and that they're very closely aligned to the estate's aspects, but if there are questions specifically about well, what would that mean in service terms to the A&E departments, for example, then I'd be happy on behalf of my provider colleagues to be able to answer those questions if they were forthcoming.
Okay, fine, thank you. Considering that the information you've had from today about the 19th, myself and colleagues will be talking to the chair of the JHOSC as well about what we feel the agenda-wise and should come to the main committee on the 30th and how we can get the best out of the paper you're putting up on the 19th, what will be in the public domain and what we can actually discuss around that. But thank you for sharing the date with us and the information. And officers tell me that it is within our timeline of our constitutions to actually get something out.
So can I just say, the 19th now sounds like, you know, if I'm really waiting for the 19th, it might be the 20th or 21st. We're not meeting until the 19th, so we'll just make sure, because we'll need to agree what we're going to do, and we might need to make some moves, so it'll be just after that. But you know, that's when we're meeting.
Right. So are we saying that papers might not be available to officers, and the JHOSC committee comes under the Merton Constitution, am I right? Yes. Yeah, so the Merton Constitution is probably different from the Sun's. So I'd just be
My
grateful.
understanding is that you need the papers on the 22nd, so it should be fine.
That was,
Yeah.
There we go then, it's going to be fine.
22nd, yeah?
Yes. So it should be fine.
If I could just make a point, the 22nd is the final day. You don't have to wait until the 22nd. I think the point has been made earlier that a number of elected members have jobs, full-time jobs, and we have responsibilities to think. For example, last night I attended 2 meetings that related to my role as a Merton councillor. So if you leave it until the last minute, what you're doing is actually preventing more effective scrutiny of what you're proposing to do. And these are really important issues affecting our community, and we want them as early as possible, not leaving it to the last possible minute, please.
So I am giving you my assurance that what we are doing, we will give it to you the earliest possible opportunity. What I'm saying, we're not meeting until the 19th, so we may have to do, you know, some rewrites, or we may have to amend it, in which case we will let you have it as soon as we have finished it, but it will definitely be before the 22nd, is what I'm saying to you. So we will make sure it's definitely in your timescales. We will get it to you as soon as we have finished it.
Yes, it's on circulated
This afternoon.
this one came out. Sorry, came out this afternoon. This one. Yeah. I've been in my people afternoon, so we might have happened. So we just say, and I think. Sorry, what I would say is, of course, when this committee moves into mandatory mode, we will be, and if I'm still the chair, I will be expecting papers and depth of those papers to be within the constitutions for us. I know we're all working hard, and I know there's a lot of paperwork, but once we become mandatory, we are going to have to stick to what is our legal responsibility to drive this forward on behalf of our residents.
So we absolutely understand that, and we will make sure that happens. I think because we're in the phase where we are still in draft, we are still producing papers, we are trying to get the most up-to-date information to you, that we took a judgment that either you wanted this tonight or we wouldn't give you anything and we would just talk to you, and we thought it was better for us to give you this information because it's the most up-to-date information. We apologise that it's late. We felt it was the right thing to do. Perhaps we liaise with the chair if we have this in the future where we decide whether or not we issue it or not, if we have more up-to-date information available, and if you're unhappy for us to release that at that time, we will not do that, and we'll wait until a date where we get that in good time to you.
I do appreciate there's a balance between collecting up-to-date evidence and pushing it out, and it's fast moving. I alluded to that earlier, that we want the best evidence to come to us. So it's just a question of trying to think that forward a little bit more with us as councillors, etc. So I think we've made that point.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that actually that concludes the update. I'm happy to take an update from any other officers of the IHT that might want to make a comment. Actually, thank you very much. And also, is any of my members?
No,
Peter? Right. Just we will be meeting as our full committee on the 30th. There is no date down here for the next meeting. I haven't got one on here. I suspect that the 19th and what comes out and what we make this as our wider committee will really colour, and some of your colleagues in the NHS will colour some of our dates that we need to put in our diary moving forward. But anyway, thank you very much for that. Thank the officers and thank the IHT team for their work, and we are looking forward. Thank you very much.